All right, our group is together for exam 1. I'm Kyle Grimm.
Dante Parente.
Ian Zandier.
Willow Place.
Lillian Miller.
For question 1, we're going to start. I'm going to read it, and then we're going to respond to it, and then hopefully get to a group discussion. Question 1 is, throughout the beginning of the semester, we have been reading and talking about the status of religious belief within society during the current historical moment. As a group, explain how the place of faith and reason has developed over time from the pre-modern to modern to postmodern. Using these concepts, the group should explain these different periods, variously understanding the relationship between the nature of truth and its and its ability to be known, especially with regards to immaterial matters such as morality. For instance, is it possible to have reason-based discussion and debate about religious matters? What place is there, or not, for these sort of discussions in society? Students should showcase their understanding for these arguments and readings before critically agreeing or disagreeing with the arguments. So, to start it off, we're going to break down this question in a couple parts here since there's multiple questions. So, is it possible to have reason-based discussion and debate about religious matters? In 2020, things have definitely become increasingly complicated. People are a little bit worried about, if I come out as someone saying, I go to church every Sunday and, I'm very devout about my beliefs, am I, sort of in jeopardy of, saying, oh, you're a Bible thumper or something to that effect, where it's really something that, are you at risk or in jeopardy of, being called out for that sort of beliefs, and how do you react to people, countering your beliefs? And really, that's been one of the main themes of the course. Is if it comes down to something of, where you're in church. Go ahead. I'm out. We're far.
So I think really what it comes down to here is you can't really say that one belief is better than another. Just because you're a devout Catholic doesn't make you any better than someone who's, say, Jewish or Muslim. You know what I mean? Like if you go to church consistently, you can't consider yourself better than Muslims solely because it's what you believe in, because we all grow up believing different things. Yeah.
So, I'll add to that because, I think Kyle made a good point that 2020 being a Catholic, that sucks. Because like Wachs said in class, was Wednesday International Make Fun of Catholics Day? You put the ashes on your head.
Yeah.
It sucks because you can't have a view without being made fun of, or being told, oh, you're you're anti-LGBTQIA exclamation point, all that good stuff. Just because your beliefs, that's what you're called. So it should be possible to have an actual discussion and debate about religious matters without two people ending up hating each other afterwards. Because at the end of the day, you believe something, I believe something. They're totally different. They could be different, but it's what you believe. You shouldn't be judged for what you believe. You may not like the person, but you shouldn't be like, oh man, the hell with that person sucks. You should be able to discuss things in a moral way. Kind of like how hate talks about, morality and politics. It should be like that in religion. Moral, actually have a discussion, civil discussion, and be able to, go ahead.
So to your point, do you think there is a place for it in society, or do you think it has rightfully sort of disappeared and sort of polarized on the subject? Because right now, like you're saying, people are afraid to sort of state their beliefs, especially as a white person, as a Catholic, where that's an easy target for for that sort of criticism.
It should be. You should be able to have the discussion about it. Now, will you be able to? That's another question, but you should be able to, because no one, disagreeing is what makes us human. You should be able to disagree with someone and it'd be fine. You shouldn't have to all have the same beliefs, because when you all have the same beliefs, you're like North Korea. You're like, Kim Jong-un is the best and he never goes to the bathroom. It's stupid. That doesn't make sense. So us being different makes us better.
Lily, counterpoint.
I don't think that you can have reason-based discussion and debate because, like he said, people don't get along, people have different views and stuff. Also, I remember talking about how faith and reason are, private matters, like people don't like talking about it. Like in the modern and postmodern like era, people feel that like faith and reason are private and like they're subjective, so like people don't want to talk about
So what you're saying is it should be sort of vanishing from public life, sort of emphasis on that separation of church and state,
Right.
where it shouldn't be really involved in any government dealings, and it should be within, your house and with your family and how you're
Right.
dealing with stuff.
it. Right.
Okay, I think it's a fair point. Ian, would you like to contribute something?
I mean, not much to that. Mostly what you just said though is what Wachs talked about, like religion today being privatized, like the way Lily thinks. Like more people are just thinking about the religion through themselves and through their families, and not as a community as a whole. Like you could just like growing up going to like CCD, I could tell that they would tell us through the years that less and less people were going to church all the time. You'd see less people, whether it's praying or just doing whatever they need to do to show their religious beliefs. You just see less of it now because it's more privatized.
So what would be all of your stance on, so I'm someone, I go to church every Sunday, and I would like to be that person. I think we've all seen, like, you're going to a sporting event or something, and there's someone on like a sidewalk with a big sign saying, with a bunch of Bible verses and saying, I think we've all seen it on like Instagram, you know what I'm talking about?
John 3:16.
Yeah, John 3:16 and all that, and all those like apocalyptic type things, how like you should be repenting, and so what would be your stance on someone sort of being out on the street, sort of being over, like not even just like going to church, but like being like over the top with their religion on the corner?
So like I think that's more something they're doing just to get like, I won't say guilt, but like just for lack of a better word, like just to make other people feel guilty for where they stand in life and try to use religion. Like I'm sure like some of those people are realistically religious, but I feel like that's more or less just like a pity thing. People are just trying to like get money from people and stuff like that.
See, I'm all for it.
Okay.
I don't care, like, you want to go out there and talk about your religion and hold up, signs, John 3:16, whoop whoop, like, go
Yeah.
ahead, who cares?
Mhm.
Your
So
religion,
you would
can
say
believe
that's
what you want.
like a First Amendment thing, go out and do your thing?
See, I agree on that. It's just,
Well, I wouldn't be saying it like it should be regulated by government or anything. I just like, what is your opinion on, just them doing it in general? Is it something that should be, I don't want to say socially unacceptable, because I think most forms of free speech should really be accepted. I mean, there's obviously that strange line between you go from free speech to hate speech, and then that's where like the government starts to get in and things get blurred. But I think, as far as going out and speaking your religion, that is definitely not something to be touched by the government, but is it something that fits within like the 2020 social construct? Not that these people should be, if they're out there doing it, they should come out and get clubbed, but, are we just kind of walking past them?
It doesn't fit in the 2020 social construct just because, like you can't talk about religion. You can't talk about certain things without people starting to get into a fight. And so like in the 2020 social construct, you can't really talk about it, but it's one of the things like you should be able to. You should be able to look at someone who you completely disagree with on literally everything and actually be able to talk to that person about religion. It's like, oh, my religion says this, your religion says that. And you should be able to talk to that person about it without wanting to punch that person in their nose.
This, like, he's been doing like the timelines on the board for like every single class, but he'll draw like faith reason for like pre-modern, modern, postmodern, and for postmodern every time he crosses out faith and reason, just to show that like you just talked about, there's no reasoning when people have different opinions with you nowadays, because everybody thinks their own stuff, they do whatever they want to do anyway, so I mean there's really no reasoning with arguing. It's like whatever he said about like the, what is it, beans, he said like, I like beans, you don't like beans, or something like that, you can't argue about it. That's not just how it is, and like, that's the reasoning part, but the faith part is taken away just because everybody's so individualistic now that they try to take their beliefs on by themselves instead of as a community, like I was saying before.
So my question again, so we can bring it back. So we take that same situation with, the guy out there with the sign, the religious priest or whatever, yelling Bible verses at people. We also see, in maybe a slightly less threatening way, the same situation, but people with signs, but they're pictures of post-abortion babies, right? So as a society, do we get into that sort of reason of pro-choice versus pro-life and the religious implications of both, sort of in a social setting.
That's more like morality, like second question. We still have to go over like the first part of the first question, like we have to go through pre-modern, modern, post-modern, and explain faith and reason, like it says for every single section. So we can do that next. The because that's what question 2 mostly about. It's about morality, isn't it?
Yeah.
Yeah, so we can do that next. So if like you're asking morality about like abortion and all that stuff, we'll tie that in the next one. But like I had more stuff just for number 1 for this part. So I did a bunch of research and stuff and like looked like how every section's cut off, like the timelines for pre-modern, modern, postmodern. And the way I broke it up is pre-modern, you have both faith and reason, and it was mainly like you talked about the Greco-Romans and the Israelites. Like you even like reading from the Bible, like growing up through CCD or Catholic school or whatever. Like you know that like Moses helping Israel like move out of Egypt and everything like that.
Right.
Their main focus was just on gods, and they believed gods gave them everything, so they had no way to reason with one another because they all believed the same thing. Then for the next part, pre-modern, modern, it's mainly just switching over to like Darwinian methods, like scientific method and everything like that, because science was just such a big thing, and that was like around, I think it said something like the 1800s or something like that. But yeah, I mean, from pre-modern to modern, it's just all scientific method, all the new discoveries. I wrote down that they just created like the bunch of telescopes so they could see out further than we ever could before. So they were discovering new parts of the universe that they thought at the time would like answer all their questions. So they started to turn away from faith. That's why he would on the board write cross out faith for that part and just put reason, because they're using reason to talk about science instead of faith. And then from the modern to postmodern, like I said before, you cross out both faith and reason, and that gets more into like the endpoint for that. Into modern and postmodern is more like Nietzsche and like nihilism.
Right.
So now you're not caring about anything; you just worry about yourself and how everything benefits you, and that goes with like utilitarianism and all that stuff too. But I don't know if anyone's anything to
I
add.
remember talking about how like in the beginning, it started off like in the Greeks, they were like reason, and then the Israelites were like faith, and then like they ended up merging and like synthesizing into faith and reason, like towards like orthodoxy and stuff like that, and like on the timeline that he was drawing in class.
So basically the point, so he references like at this historical moment, right? Everything that you just said has led up to obviously now chronologically. So there is no, you said he crossed out faith and reason?
For postmodern.
Right, so there is no faith and there is no reason?
Yeah.
Because we're just at a point of like just strict
just
disagreement.
ourselves.
So like there's like multiple points. So you've got a group, like you'd say, let's call it like a devout religious group, regardless of religion, just like blanket all people that are very staunch in their beliefs in one category. Then we have the other category, which is like more of, scientific and atheist perspective. And then we'll go with like a lot of casual religious goers, which would be the MTD, which is moralistic therapeutic deism, in which case people are just sort of banking on that thought, and because like as Wachs would say, like that feel good in the center. So since we have like those kind of 3 groups, and we've kind of all polarized, what is potentially a point where we could maybe find some reason, even if we all have different faith?
Yes.
Yes, all right, that's a good point. I think to just add to go to number 2.
That was pretty good, dude. Yeah, like 20 seconds left, that first 15 minutes.
Nice. So question 2, as a group, overview Haidt's argument concerning the source and substance of morality in the righteous mind. Make sure to situate Haidt's argument in relationship to the worldviews developed in Prom. 1, building upon this, discuss whether or not you find the arguments of the authors compelling. In the section, work on maintaining logical consistency in your argument, as well as asking good questions in response to each other.
Bring back up the question you had about abortion. For
Give me a second. So previously we talked about sort of the separation of church and state, and also sort of the guy with the sign with the Bible verses, and we also have like another similar group that will be out there trying to just go to a Pirate game, and they're on the corner, they've got pictures of abortion, they're holding on signs. So as a society, what is our obligation to sort of see the reasoning between pro-life and pro-choice and understand the backing of both, of maybe more of a scientific perspective or a social leniency perspective or like a religious perspective, which would be the pro-life.
So I think from like a moralistic standpoint, it's kind of hard to argue that in any way it's like right to kill a child that's in the stomach, you know what I'm saying? It's just like, I lost my train of thought. I'm gonna add something to that.
No, don't.
Ask it again, ask the ending part again.
So what is our role as a society to keep the separation of church and state, but also recognize as a society we have multiple different beliefs, whether it's any of the three groups that we talked about previously that are polarized and turned off, but what is the moral obligation of our society, no matter what sort of the background is of it being the pro-life, maybe from a religious standpoint, or a social leniency, which is maybe like your atheist standpoint, or you're obviously like our devout religious, which would also be similar to the pro-life argument. So as a society, what is really our obligation to talk about that and keep it going in sort of like Heights construct?
Yeah. So I think from like a moralistic standpoint, it's hard to take the viewpoint of being okay with taking the life of a child as they're being in the womb. But I think it all kind of ties back to the previous question and the fact that society as a whole is just becoming more individualistic and they're caring more about themselves and their future as opposed to others. So realistically, since it's not like a physical being, they just believe that it's okay to do what they're doing.
Okay. So from sort of Hyde's perspective, and he likes to, if we can kind of keep with that three-pronged like social group, he thinks that we're all, I believe he used like a beehive mentality, and the only time we're really outside of our individual sort of mindset is we're team players. I don't want to say on accident, but we're team players with people that also think like us individually. So if we have that hive mentality, what is the hope for sort of interrelation between those three groups if all we do is break into that hive and sort of get stalemated again?
Honestly, I don't think anything's ever gonna change. Just how people are, everybody's different. Everybody has different opinions, especially nowadays. It's pretty annoying, but I don't think it's gonna change ever. Honestly, I don't think it's possible. But like you're talking about with like coming from different places and having your certain hive, like I relate that back to Heights' weird chapter he talked about, like Western educated, industrial, rich, democratic, that basically like talk about like the culture you grew up in is what forms you. It's and like the more weird you are, I think you talk about, is the more not individualistic, but the more like you cling to certain materials compared to other people who maybe grew up with less and weren't as like educated or as rich or poor or anything like that. Like so you grow up with the same mindsets as they do. But even before that, he talked about like what like morality really came from. He talked about two different ways. One was innate, which was the nativist answer, which means you basically are like born with that, but then it comes at certain points I took from that. And then the other one was you learn through your childhood. So it's more of like the nurture, like everything's nurtured into you while you're growing up, which would be empiricist answer. Then he himself came up with the third one for morality, and that was, he said we learn from harm. Remember he gave like the one thing of the babies and the serial killers and murderers or whatever?
Right.
Like one can feel but doesn't have emotions, like that, like the opposite way. So he just said like basically babies learn justice from injustice through harm. But then later on he went to like reject that and then came up with just the basic fact that morality comes from the culture around you and where you grew up in. So
To add to that, so you were talking about the thing you said, the weird morality, which is, like you said, Western educated, industrialized, rich, and democratic. Now, like directly from the chapter, which is chapter 5, he says, the weirder you are, the more you perceive a world full of separate objects rather than relationships. And I think that's extremely true today, because you see people who, like we talked about before, a lot of people are individualistic, which isn't bad. But at a certain point, you need to like realize that coming together and forming relationships is ultimately the better thing to do, because like whenever we all like separate ourselves into like different beehives, like you said before, like different areas, then we become like more divided and more divisive and more separated, as opposed to like one cohesive unit working together to achieve a common goal.
You guys have anything to add?
Well, he goes on and talks about like Republicans and Democrats and like how when they talk or argue with each other, they don't like they find it hard to reason with the other party, and like he like tries to go in and talk about why it's hard for them to reason with the other party. I'm trying to find my notes here.
Sort of while Lily's finding that, but sort of the question touches on whether or not we find Haidt's opinion and argument compelling. I was sort of torn on it. I thought for a lot of the book he made a lot of sense, partially because some of my beliefs aligned with his, but at the end he kind of lost me when he kind of left it as an open-ended type of thing. I was just curious, right after we get, what was your point from the last time?
Oh, so like he talks about how like the one side doesn't listen to the other side and how they don't listen to reason or whatever, and then he goes on to say like the problem isn't about they don't listen to reason, they reason but based on like their conclusions. Like they don't open up to see like what the other side is thinking. They're already focused on like what they think and they're not going to change that. So like that's why it's hard for like the two parties to like
Right. So when he talks about, before we get like too far back, like so he talks about the metaphor of like, I believe it's an elephant and then the rider, and then the rider is sort of at the mercy of the elephant, more or less, because it's pretty hard to move an elephant. I was just sort of curious what everyone else's opinion was, because mine was sort of conflicted. I thought he made points, and I thought overall I thought he was wrong in the end, but bless you.
Wait, are you talking in reverse like the elephant and the rider?
Just overall, like his thesis of the book,
Oh.
just because it was sort of asking that, like whether or not we agreed with his opinions or not.
I mean, yeah, you can agree with a lot of his opinions because they're all, or not all, they're mostly factual. He takes them from certain samples of the population, but everything he does is scientific. And I don't think he shows enough of the faith background. Like he shows the reason like we talked about, but he doesn't show the faith completely.
Right, most of his chapters are like, or like his topics, he like backs it up with like
They're just studies.
when he takes like studies and stuff.
Yeah, that's all he does. But yeah, like I agree with you. Like at the end, he really loses track. I think some of the stuff, can't remember exactly, but I didn't agree with some of the final chapters. His stuff he was adding into it.
Yeah, so again, he like sort of talked about, to draw back on what Lily said, was sort of that divide that we see like politically, which it's easy to see that because everybody, no matter how serious you are into politics, you do find something that you align with, and you sort of end up on each side of that aisle. And what has happened is that things have just turned off, and both sides of the aisle are kind of going their own way, and there's not any sort of communication, as he says in the book.
And to add to that, there's like nothing in the middle. So
Right.
like, so if you look at like a political spectrum, you got, I don't know who's this is, but you got crazy leftists over here, crazy Republicans over here, no one right here. I don't know if is this on camera? Yeah, I think it is. You can kind of tell. Like no one's in the middle. Everyone's either way over here or way over there. There's no center ground on anything. ever, and it sucks.
So, going off of what Height said, is it possible, in his opinion, that it could happen again, and then your opinion on whether it can happen again? Because there was at some point sort of
what happened again?
that middle ground, or at least there was a time where we sort of had interpolitical discourse where it was at least fair and understanding, where we had, you know, more of a moderate type of thing. I would say it's as recently as probably 20 years ago, you still had a pretty good situation. I would say, as far as things taking a turn for the darker, you probably look at the 1992 election with Bill Clinton and H.W. Bush, who was the incumbent president, where politics sort of started to get a little murky as far as what they were saying about each other in the media. And obviously things have changed a lot with social media, and I mean, look at Twitter.
Yeah.
So how has things sort of trickled down maybe from like the political top to how we treat each other in our daily life, be it like Twitter?
I think if you look at it from like Hade's perspective, he's like more in favor of like civility and morality in politics. Like the idea that you can disagree with someone on absolutely anything, but at the end of the day, you can still go get a beer with them and talk about the family, like that idea. And I think that's totally right, because that's how it should be. Like, look at like back in the 80s, Reagan was president, he had a Democratic speaker, Tip O'Neill, for his entire presidency. They disagreed on everything, but they were still friends. Like, that's how it should be. Disagree on major things, but still at the end of the day, be like, oh yeah, how's the wife, how's the kids, how's everything going, are you good? You know, stuff like that. That's how it should be.
So,
But like everything nowadays, just with like how people are, everything's for money. It's for wealth. It's for power. So even if like you listen to certain news networks, I mean, it's definitely all not true. I mean, I'm sure like most of it is, but not all. But just like I personally believe all their motives are just for money and power. That's all it is. So like they could have like certain beliefs about whatever it is, abortion or whatever, but actually they have a different stance, but they're with a certain group and don't want to stand out or lose their potential power, so they just go along with the census of everybody else.
You're talking about politicians?
Yeah.
Okay, gotcha.
Just like Democrats, Republicans, whatever, it don't matter.
Just want to make sure.
Right, and he also talks about how, in the book, how like a lot of people just want like social, like, they're just trying to like get social power, so like they're trying to like, you know, they have their beliefs based off of like, they're trying to be like the top social group, you know what I mean?
well, I think what has happened is, and I think Wachs touched on it, was we've sort of, in our entire political history, and things have been exploited by technology, I think recently because we're so connected, but both sides of the political spectrum have sort of sifted through to a sort of main ideas, and we've sort of reached that point where it's like, it's becoming less agreeable on points to the other side of the aisle, that to the point that we've come to, where it's sort of like a stopping point, where we've both sort of sifted through that sort of stuff we could agree on to the point where we're at sort of ahead. So what do we do with that conflict point? I know Wachs said it was violence. Is there a way that we could use like reasoning to get to that point where it's more of a civil thing than a violent thing?
In the form of politics, if like we're staying on that subject, I think that media and everybody else would express if we were trying to reason with one another, both different sides, but they would like try to express that altogether they're coming into like common ground, but in reality they're probably not. They're just saying that just to calm society down as a whole. So, yeah.
So should we be looking to sort of maybe hit that agree to disagree thing and
Right.
be worried about
I don't
the
see
state of the
that.
country more so than pushing an agenda? Because that would be my opinion.
See, I think when it comes down to it, over the past, say, 10 to 15 years, the emergence of social media is really what's given the division a much wider gap. Is because, like, the president's main form of communication right now to the people is probably Twitter.
Right.
And it's a lot easier just to, like, type things out than to actually say it aloud. Like, I don't know, I believe it was Wachs, and he said that in class, it's a lot easier just, like, send things from your phone, but a lot of the stuff you wouldn't actually say to, like, your face, and it gives, like, a platform for people to say things they wouldn't normally say. And for other people to agree with them.
Like, what's called Louis C.K., this isn't the one we watched in class, but I watched this on the internet. He was talking about how he was driving his car and someone cut him off and he yelled out the window, useless piece of shit. And then he goes, imagine if you're just going in an elevator and someone walks up to you and accidentally bumps you on the shoulder. You're not gonna turn and be like, you useless piece of shit, like you're not gonna do it. But when you're in the car, that's like, relates to this, as in the car, it's your phone. I can just go on Twitter and say anything I want.
Yeah.
And like, who's gonna stop me? It doesn't matter. But you're not gonna say it actually in person.
I think it's a good point to go on to question 3. Finally, height in passing makes allusion to the possibility of using chemicals in the water supply to make a better, more socially cohesive and righteous society. He seems to have no moral problem with the scenario, but rather that it is simply not feasible. However, as we discussed in class, the post-humanist Yuval Noah Harari, socially specifically, maintains that it will be possible in the near future. As a group discusses the following scenario: if I could show you that by adding certain chemicals, say a concoction of antidepressant, anti-anxiety, and happiness chemicals like dopamine, to the water supply of a community without their consent or knowledge, that social problems such as violence, crime, anxiety, depression, etc., you can provide a compelling moral reason why we should or should not do that. Do not focus on the likelihood or probability of the scenario. Suspend the disbelief momentarily and assume that it is possible. Again, in this section, work on maintaining logical consistency in your arguments as well as asking good questions in response to others. Well, if we're going with the perspective that it is possible, and let's say the technology is right here in this water bottle, and all I have to do is dump it in our water supply, and that sort of thing happens. I think it's very tough because you sort of take away a look at an individual freedom perspective, and you look at it as more of a 1984 like state scenario where they control the people, and that would be crazy to me. I have no desire to do that. I mean, I think depression's a bad thing. Obviously, the book that we're going to be leading into is some heavy stuff, and we don't want to talk about anything suicidal or anything. I've witnessed suicide in my family. I want no part of it, but I think at the core of it, I think there's a human right to sort of have some say in your environment, and I don't think it's upon the state to make that determination, because that's what it would have to be.
See, I think,
Is anyone for putting chemicals in the water supply?
I'm freaking torn on this one.
Not without them knowing, like,
Yeah, that's
maybe
kind of my
maybe
whole
if they could say like, oh, if you want to, you can, but like,
as I'm just gonna say, like, we just live in a society where consent is literally everything, and now more than ever. So to go and do like a non-consensual act like that and not tell anybody, there's just so much gray area when it comes to consent. It's just a tough situation.
That's why I'm torn, because part of me is just like, well, I mean, you're doing a great thing. And the other part of me is just like, let's say I live in the society and someone like did that. I honestly would probably be pretty pissed, just because like I didn't sign off, I didn't have any say in it. You know, it abridged my freedom.
There's also just like a lot of people out there that don't want like unnatural resources in their body like that.
Yeah,
Well, just for the sake of argument, because it seems like we all are pretty against it, but let's take a very smaller thing. Wachs was talking about, you know, the traffic. Well, he got dinged for the ticket for speeding because of the camera. So we have elected legislators, and I know in Pennsylvania there's the clicker ticket laws, right? Where we're going to hit you with a ticket if you don't obviously buckle up. So is it similar that we already have a law like that in place where the state has determined it is the best for the people to use a seatbelt? Is it just as similar in the precedent set that we can use this magic chemical in our water supply?
I'm gonna answer that, but I also need to get something off my chest first. I parked in Southside one time and I parked head out. I got a $25 ticket for that. That's BS. Okay, that didn't affect anybody. Pittsburgh parking people suck. Now to answer your question, can you repeat your question?
So from my perspective, I think as the state, you have elected whatever officials that's determined by Congress that this magic chemical right here is gonna make everybody happier and it's just gonna eliminate all our problems.
Yeah.
I can make that law. What do you say about it?
What do I say about it? I say let's do it. If you can show me evidence that, okay, like you do a study, like you test people, okay, we use this is the effects on people, this is, you know, what's good, this is the harms, all that good stuff. And then you say, okay, we put up for a vote. referendum vote, yes or no. Like, you just give the people the information. You say, okay, this is what it is, we do this, just give us the information and then we decide.
So you're saying it's okay, but you are going to tell the people that you're doing it? Like, this isn't gonna be like something done behind
Yeah,
their
you tell
backs.
the people, yeah. Like, you
Okay.
either tell the people or you give the people a choice.
I don't think you can make it a law though. I feel like people can like decide what they want to drink and what they don't. I don't think it can
But
be
they
a law
don't, but
that
if they
have to
drink,
water.
their public water supply, which everything is, they're gonna drink our chemical, because just like they're gonna have to buckle up and travel on public roads. Roads aren't generally
Yeah,
privatized, but that's the law. So disagree with me. Tell
Yeah,
me I'm
like,
wrong.
you can't make that a law.
I can make it a law that all of our water is gonna have this chemical in it. It's your choice if you wanna drink it. It's your choice if you wanna drive a car.
All right, dictator.
So tell me I'm wrong, because I'm telling you right now, miracle chemical, that's gonna fix everything. You don't want to touch the miracle chemical, you can have a Coke, but I don't know what water they're using, it's got our stuff in it too.
Well, I guess there's nothing I can do about it if you make it a law.
Well, tell me why I shouldn't make it a law.
Because like some people don't want to. Like,
Some people
some
don't want to drive a seat or drive a car without wearing a seatbelt. Maybe it itches their neck
Yeah,
wrong, but it's
they also have the option to not have a seatbelt. They just get like a ticket or something.
Yeah.
If you put stuff in water, like you have to drink water. You can't.
right.
So they don't. So they don't have an option.
See, we also live in a society where water is essential to life. Driving a
Right,
car is
driving,
not.
yeah,
you can
right.
just walk.
Right. You don't need
You
to.
can ride a bike. You can
What if
ride
you're
a
going
skateboard,
from-
You don't have to wear a
do
seatbelt
whatever
to
you want.
live.
What if you're going to Tennessee to Wyoming? Might need a
You can
car.
still walk.
Go Forrest
Drink
Gump
some
on
water.
it.
But I think you're missing the point here. The precedent set that the government can make a decision, whether you like it or not, in the best interest of its citizens. It's not, I don't care if you drive a car, but the thing is, if you do drive a car, we determine it's better for you, and that's the main point. Can the government determine with this, it's better for you, and you and you and you, that we should have this miracle chemical in the water because no one's gonna be depressed, there's not gonna be any murder. Can the government make that sort of distinction and decision for you because they're elected officials?
I don't believe anyone can make any decision for you.
Well, they did. You have to wear a seatbelt or you get a ticket.
I don't care. I'm not talking about seatbelts.
But
I'm
that's
talking about the water.
Exactly. No, okay, there we go. Seatbelts, water. Here we go. Government can say, yeah, you have to do this. But it's the same thing as a seatbelt. I don't wear my seatbelt, you give me a ticket. I don't drink your water, you give me a.
Die. You die because you
give
need
me
water.
die.
Like.
You give me die. You kill, like, you know, like you have, it's all about, comes down to, okay, the government made the decision, they passed a law, president signed it, all that good stuff. But the people have the freedom to decide, I'll follow your law or to hell with your law.
Right.
The question still is, it says without their knowledge. So they have no knowledge. So the government's not telling anybody
Right.
at all.
So, but that's my
we're
point
talking about the morality
to
of
begin
it.
with. Can the government make that distinction?
The government's not making the decision though.
Well, who does then?
Him.
Him? Who's him? What do
It's
you
not,
mean?
it's
You
not a
never
hypothetical
wrote this.
situation. We
You
don't need to
never
bring
wrote
the
this.
government into it. Like,
Whoever wrote this, if I could show you that by adding certain chemicals, so let's just say it's
Who
it's
makes
one
that
person.
decision? So it's you, Ian. Okay, you have the miracle chemical.
All right.
whoever's answering the question is making the decision. It is not the government.
I'm glad you contributed. Well, thank you. Because someone's got to make the call. So is it okay with everyone that they get to make the call? Because it would be logically, Ian doesn't have the power to
That's
do
the
it.
thing. There's no one person, no group of people, no government. It doesn't matter. It could be God. They still
Okay.
don't have the right to do that.
Okay, so they don't have the right to do it.
Right.
Yes.
What?
No matter who
Say-
it
It's
say-
not,
is,
say-
it's not morally right
I
to
think
make
there- I-
that decision.
no matter who it is, if it's a group of people, it doesn't matter. They don't have the right to choose for other people how they would change their lives.
Yeah. That really.
Like if I want to be depressed, like I want to be depressed.
I think, personally, I think if they were to do that, which, I mean, this doesn't really deal with morality, it's just like my personal opinion, it's, people would find out somehow. Like, they will find out. Like, you're not just gonna
Yeah.
put chemicals in the water supply without anybody else knowing. Like, there's gonna be, like, plans of it or something.
That was gonna be my argument. What happens when people find
Yeah.
out?
Like, they definitely will find out, and, like, even if, like, they make this thing where, like, they can't be depressed or they can't be not happy or whatever,
Yeah.
I don't know how that would work, but personally, I would hate living a life that's just consistent. Like,
Right.
Yeah.
consistency,
So,
it's not.
Whether it's the government, whether it's whatever deity you want to bring up, it's not within their right to make that decision.
Correct.
Right.
Yeah. Individual individual freedom.
Okay.
Give me liberty or give me death.
What are we on?
Is there anything we want to go back and touch on? Or do you want to propose a new situation? I think the one we can talk about the most is number 2 is morality. Just like you can give us a different example of morality.
Okay, so what we covered already, we covered abortion.
No, what he talked about in class with coronavirus.
Okay.
Do we just kill everybody?
Yeah, that's good.
All right, we can talk about that. So I know, so Wachs basically said utilitarianism, 30,000 people got it, gone.
Yep.
They're done. So
Benefits.
it's better for everyone that they're gone because the disease doesn't spread.
You're saying like you just killed them off? Cause
Yeah, they're gone. They're just pop.
Just snaps his fingers.
Right, they're gone.
Thanos.
Right. So what do we do with that situation?
Yep.
Are we for it or
Yep.
are we against it?
For
For it. Okay, so Dante, you're for it. Who's against it?
But here's the thing, I don't know.
Yeah, I don't
I
know.
don't But this, it's like the exact same thing we literally just talked about with the water. Who has the right to say that somebody else has to die?
I mean, they're gonna die anyway.
But you don't know.
I mean, they're not
They
guaranteed.
could find the cure in the next 5 minutes.
That's true.
then that'll
Most likely they won't,
Then
but
that'll save the people
they
in the
didn't.
future that get it after we kill the 30,000.
I mean, you don't have to kill them, you can like
Well,
lock them up
The
somewhere.
problem is diseases don't
So they
die.
can't
I mean,
even-
they're already quarantined and it's still spreading.
Right, so the thing is, diseases don't die with the dead, right? So things are still gonna be out and in the system even after they're gone.
True.
So if you just keep killing and killing and killing, you still have to find that solution. So regardless if they're alive or dead, it doesn't really seem to be the problem. So as long as they're quarantined, they can't be affecting anybody else anyway. So killing them is basically a moot point. So if we just look at it as the quarantine is basically a killing type scenario. And if those people are sick and while we're looking for a cure, they're gonna die anyway, that is the reality we kind of sadly have to live with. But if we can kind of back away for a second and see that, you know, as we find the research, it's probably beneficial long-term as with those 30,000 people that die, the viruses are gonna evolve and keep going. So how do we sort of keep them from spreading it, but without kaput?
What if we do both? What if we just, while we're eliminating them, we keep people as like tests. Like we test different, what are they called, vaccinations and cures on like a certain amount of people. We eliminate some of them, you know, population control, all that good stuff. But then you keep the other people as a test, and then like you.
But what happens when the people that are testing the people that have the disease get infected, then they spread somewhere else, possibly without anybody knowing, so then it spreads to a different section, and then another 30,000 people end up getting infected. So now you gotta kill 60,000 people.
I'm kidding, all right? No, but like.
And then if there's another disease, and the same thing happens again, then you're gonna kill more people, and then who's to say, like, that you can kill the next group too, and then that you won't stop killing certain groups of people because they have different, they can potentially harm you. Because then you can get in different things, not just diseases, you can get criminals, prisons, like all that, like rapists, murderers, all those people. Then you could just say, I mean, obviously with that's but like, they could say, oh, we'll just kill them like we do with people with diseases. So then you're like basically bringing it on, and then you gotta ask yourself, where does this end?
Well, I think about it. Does it do a greater good to society have like to kill off the 30,000 or just to let them go? Just go wherever you want. And then like I feel like going into all the other things you added there, like killing basically anybody, I feel like that's all like hypothetical. I feel like the whole thing's hypothetical because I have to become a dictator, which not that easy.
It's on the bucket list though.
Did you think this wasn't gonna be hypothetical?
Yeah, we're
You think
like.
this is all gonna happen?
Don't think that's so.
But I think words.
It's a tough one, I know.
Yeah, I know, because like, I'm trying to balance here, like, yeah, let's get rid of them, but also like, let's help people.
See, it's just tough because you're the only one arguing this standpoint.
Yeah, I
so-
know. I figured I'd take the opposite one to make this interesting.
I think you just gotta like let it go as long as possible to try to find a cure. It's probably the best way to deal with it.
Yeah, as long as they're quarantined,
Instead of
there's nothing else
killing
we're
them.
gonna do.
Yeah, like they're all quarantined in all the other countries, and it's still like getting out.
Or it could be like the government is now, like they're not giving people cures for certain diseases, even though they definitely already cured. But people were dying, so it's like population control like you're talking about.
Yeah.
So like cancer, like I feel like for a fact that they definitely have cures for certain cancers that are killing people, but then the population would be too high. I know, I talk about this all the time.
You're
with other
sounding like
people.
me.
But like, I mean, I honestly, I feel like that's the thing. Like, the government or whoever's in charge would withhold that information or supplies from you to reduce population. So that could become one of these times too. So like, they could already have a camera like now.
Well, then how is that different than what we talked about with question 3, where you have that miracle thing, and do you allow the government to withhold that sort of information? Is it within their
Can't
realm?
do anything.
So we just have to suck it up and take the loss on that one, I guess?
Unless you want to get in the government.
All right, well, I think that's a good stopping point for everyone.
Yeah.
Good game, everybody.
So who's gonna review this film? Who's gonna do it?
I know literally nothing about photo editing, so I'm not doing that. stupid
I've
thing
never
again.
once edited a photo, or I've never edited.